Hello and welcome to the Kyiv Post weekly podcast, the show where we discuss the highlights from this week's paper and take a look at what's coming up in next week's edition. I'm your host, Rahim Rahemtulla, a staff journalist here at the Kyiv Post. In today's programme, we'll discuss a big breakthrough made by Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau. We'll take a look at the problem of smuggling in the warzone in eastern Ukraine, and we ask, why is it so difficult to find a parking in Ukrainian capital Kiev? First, we turn to our big story of the week, and it's the one which is on our front page. It's all about Roman Nasirov, the head of Ukraine's State Fiscal Service, who has been arrested for corruption. Oleg Sukov, staff journalist here at the Kyiv Post, wrote that story, and he joins me now. Oleg, thanks for joining us. This seems like a big step forward for Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau. Is that the case?
Oh, it's the most high-ranking official to be charged by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau since the Euromaidan revolution. So in that sense, it's a step forward because the previous officials, they actually charged some top officials, but they were not as influential and as powerful as Nasirov. At the same time, the Anti-Corruption Bureau is very limited in its resources, and it will face a lot of obstacles if it tries to, pursue this case. There's a lot of evidence that the court system is influenced by Poroshenko, and the court system is very politicized, very corrupt. So, and it's highly likely that this case will be blocked by the judiciary. And it could also be blocked through the prosecutor's office because the National Anti-Corruption Bureau works in tandem with anti-corruption prosecutors. But there is some evidence that the chief anti-corruption prosecutor might be dependent on Poroshenko. And Poroshenko could be implicated in this case because one of the suspects, Alexander Onishchenko, accused Poroshenko of ordering this corruption scheme. According to Onishchenko, Poroshenko instructed Nasirov, the head of the State Fiscal Service, to indefinitely postpone tax payments in the corruption scheme that involves Onishchenko.
Do you think the fact that Nasirov was actually arrested, taken to court, whatever happens further, maybe these charges will come to nothing. But do you think the fact that it has got this far, is that in some sense a positive thing, or is this all just for show?
Well, I think it is a positive thing because, there are skeptics who dismiss everything as a show. But in a limited sense, it's a step forward because, it's like no one of that magnitude, of that scale, has been arrested in Ukraine since the Euromaidan revolution. There were cases when top officials were arrested, like under Yanukovych, but there were clearly political vendettas by Yanukovych. Yanukovych was not interested in prosecuting corruption, like Tymoshenko was jailed by Yanukovych's regime. But
this is the former President Yanukovych who was ousted in the Euromaidan.
And he jailed his political competitor Tymoshenko, who was former Prime Minister of Ukraine. In that case, Yanukovych was not interested in prosecuting corruption. He was just interested in persecuting his enemies. In this case, in the Nasirov case, there is no political motive for the Anti-Corruption Bureau to target Nasirov. It's a real, a genuine fight against corruption.
So you think NABU, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau, is truly independent? You believe?
I believe that there is a lot of evidence that it is much, much more independent than all other agencies. I've heard the opinion from some of my sources that it's not entirely independent. There is some influence, and especially there was a lot of influence on the Anti-Corruption Bureau, like in the first half of the 2016, and now it's allegedly less. So I can't rule out some influence, but it's definitely less influenced by Poroshenko than the Prosecutor General's Office, the Security Service of Ukraine, and all other law enforcement agencies.
And so, because in the past, as we've seen, and we have in the newspaper this week, we have a section on this where we list some of the previous officials who have been charged with corruption. But there's a long list of them. But in pretty much every single case, the cases against them have been thrown out, or they've got out on bail. So Ukraine does not have a a good record on this. Do you think this Nasirov case, is this the turning point?
It could be a turning point if civil society pressures the government sufficiently. Without, society's pressure, it will definitely come to nothing. Because Poroshenko has a lot of resources to actually stop this case, to have Nasirov released, and probably to have him flee to, London, where he has 2 luxury apartments. So basically, if civil society continues this pressure on the authorities, the media publicize this sufficiently, if, activists are sufficiently vocal, then there could be hope, not only for the Nasirov case, but in general for the introduction of a rule of law in Ukraine, because the Nasirov case could be like just the top of the iceberg, because if he implicates other top officials, which is doubtful, but still, if it happens, it could be like a house of cards, and a lot of the top officials could suffer, and the whole political system could actually collapse as a result. Like the whole kleptocracy could collapse.
Well, that's obviously a huge amount at stake here.
Yes.
So we'll see what Nasirov, if he will give testimony, or what's going to happen. Obviously, that will be coming in the coming weeks. But for now, that's where we'll leave it. Oleg, many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
We turn now to our second story, which is about smuggling in the war zone in eastern Ukraine. This was written by Oksana Gritsenko. She joins me now. Oksana, thank you for coming. Tell us, smuggling in eastern Ukraine, what's the size of the problem, and what does this involve?
Me and my colleague Anastasia Vlasova, the photographer, we traveled a lot to eastern Ukraine, to the war zone last year and early this year. And many times we heard from different people there that the smuggling which exists in the war zone, it has a big scale and it's a huge money.
And this is going from Ukrainian-controlled territory into separatist-held territory, or vice versa?
It happens both ways. Just there is a difference in what kind of products the smugglers bring. Because on government-controlled territory, the food products and detergents, they cost twice less than on the separatist-controlled territory. That's why it makes sense for many people just to buy some food like sausages, meat, they are the most popular, and smuggle them across the separation line and sell them for twice higher price. And many people, just like the local residents, they're trying to earn this way.
And so what's coming from separatist-controlled territory into Ukrainian government-controlled territory?
On separatist-controlled territory, there are several plants. There is an alcohol factory in Donetsk, and also a cigarette factory, which is called Hamadei, and it produces the fake cigarettes of different brands. It makes sense to bring them. The smugglers often bring them across the separation line to sell them on government control area. And there's also jewelry factory in Luhansk Oblast in Rovinki, which is called Agat. So the smugglers often also bring jewelry.
How were you able to find out about these factories? Presumably you weren't able to get into separatist-held territory, but you must have had people there who do know about these.
I spoke to people who know about this situation. First of all of these factories, they actually existed before the war. That's why it's not a secret that they are there. There was a very famous case back in 2015 when a group of people who were fighting against smuggling in a war zone, it was actually a joint group including SBU officers, soldiers, and civilian volunteer. They were killed. The car was burned down because they found a big route of smuggling, and it apparently happened not because of separatist activity, but it was done by Ukrainian soldiers.
So Ukrainian soldiers are involved as well?
One of my sources told me that actually he knows about a dozen of cases when the Ukrainian soldiers were killed by other Ukrainian soldiers because they found the routes of smuggling and they were trying to stop this. So it's a very bloody business, in fact.
And so what has the Ukrainian government's response been to all of this? Presumably if this is happening within the Ukrainian military, they must be aware.
In fact, the cases when people are being prosecuted for smuggling are very rare. First of all, because in fact, technically, it's not even smuggling because it's not a border. So according to the law, You just bring stuff from one part of Ukraine to another part of Ukraine. So if you're being caught on some, for example, carrying food or anything like this, you will be just charged of violation of economic activity, basically like trade violation, and you will get just a fine, no more than this. Speaking about these serious cases when people are being killed, to be honest, it's very hard to prove that the killings were related to smuggling, because it is a war going on and the soldiers are being killed every day on the front lines. And of course, the case of killing could be explained that this guy just stepped on the mine, or he was killed by separatists, by shelling or anything else.
And do you think then there is a solution to this problem of smuggling? Should there be a solution? I mean, clearly people in the separatist-held areas, for example, they do need the items which Ukrainians are bringing across the line. So what do you think, if there is to be some kind of resolution here, what kind of form would that take?
Yes, to be honest, when people bring just food from one part of the front line to another one, like some people, it's a common belief that it could be just called a kind of humanitarian cargo, no more than that, and it should be allowed. Basically, it will allow Ukrainian companies to earn more, because the Ukrainian products will be sold there freely, and the prices will decrease on the separatist-held area, which will be only for good for the local residents, and it will remove this possibility to earn on smuggling. It's
a profitable business, and whilst this situation continues with the separatist-held and government-held territories, the temptation will always be there for anyone to become involved in this, to make some extra money. Absolutely, and all kind of services are earning on this. I mean, not all of them, of course, but there are some people in the military, in the SBU, the police, in the Fiscal Service, who just take bribes because they can do this, and I'm sure they will keep on doing this as long as it's possible. I suppose that's something then we'll have to keep an eye on. It looks like it's set to continue. But Oksana, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. We turn now to our third and final story for today. It's part of our business focus that we have in the paper this week, which is all about the car industry in Ukraine. And as part of that feature, we have a story on parking in Kiev, here in the Ukrainian capital. Apparently a bit of a nightmare, according to Veronika, our staff journalist. She joins me now. Veronika, nowhere to put your car in the Ukrainian capital.
Fortunately, I have no car. That's why I'm a happy person, I think, because the car owners in Kyiv usually face nightmare because there are many cars in Kyiv, but not enough space for everybody to park. And there is not enough rules, or there is no legislation.
Anything you want, you come, you put your car here, you put your car there.
Yeah, nobody pays attention to that. Police is too busy solving, as they said to me, real crimes. We have a very small fine for that. It's like 200 hryvnias.
Less than $10.
Less than $10. But the damage the drivers made by chaotic parking is like costs thousands for a city budget.
The Kiev city authorities, are they aware of the issue?
It seems to me they don't care about that, as well as like the transport infrastructure in the city, because we have the Shulavsky bridge incident that happened
recently collapsed.
Yeah, recently collapsed. Part of it recently collapsed, and all our mayor said that was like the bridge got tired.
So you see, in terms of the parking, the roads, the car situation, there's simply there's no momentum here to do anything or to change anything.
There are some attempts, like lousy attempts, to change the situation. They're trying to force drivers to pay for parking, like via a special Kyiv parking app. But there is no information campaign about that there is such an app.
So presumably then, we've seen in other cities a lot of advances in car use, transport, things like car sharing schemes, electric cars, things like this, which are designed to make the urban landscape more livable. Presumably in Kiev, we're not seeing this, and it doesn't look like it's coming anytime soon. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair. We have only during weekend, our central street, Krishchatyk Street, is like locked for the cars. But still, we have a lot of protests of the drivers because they don't like to be like limited in anything. They don't like when there are some marathons in the city, which is normal for every other European country and every other country in the world. But here, drivers are constantly complaining because they think that in the city there are the chosen one.
So for now, at least, the car rules, and the pedestrians and the environment will be taking a back seat. We could say. Well, thank you very much, Veronica, for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We turn now to what's going to be appearing in next week's edition of the Kyiv Post. Among the big stories will, of course, remain the case of Roman Nasirov, the head of the State Fiscal Service. Josh Kovensky, staff journalist here at the Kyiv Post, joins me to discuss the week ahead.
Hello.
Josh, Nasirov, where do you see that going in the next week?
So right now they are filing an appeal. It's not clear how long that's going to take, but if the appellate court decides that Nasirov is to be released, then that will be one resolution to the matter this week. It's worth noting that he was not only found to have British citizenship, but also Hungarian citizenship. Nasirov was revealed to have that this past week, which is worth noting because it gives him an avenue of escape from Ukraine should he be freed from this detention.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if Nasirov does sort of win on appeal and does get freed and tries to flee the country, we're likely to see some pretty big protests about that, as the ones that we saw, similar to the ones we saw earlier this week as well.
And I think that's one thing to keep in mind is that Nasirov is in a lot of ways just a political pawn. I mean, he's a pawn. He's a pawn as head of the tax authority. He was a pawn as the people's deputy. You can even argue as a private businessman when he was an investment banker before he even went into government. He was the pawn of business interests. So I think there's a level of skepticism over this whole thing right now from people I've been speaking to who suggest that, there are political interests in Ukraine that Nasirov may be beholden to that would like the instability caused by his release to occur.
This is very, very intriguing theory you've put forward there. But moving on to slightly more...
Don't compliment me. Go on.
Moving forward to slightly more pedestrian matters, in the Kyiv Post next week, we'll be having our business focus section called Made in Ukraine. We're going to be focusing there on products made, as the title suggests, by companies based here. We'll be looking at their trials and tribulations, their attempts to go out into foreign markets, and generally to get a sense of the business climate here. Josh, what's your sense of Ukrainian goods and services? How are they performing on the world markets?
Unfortunately, quite poorly. Ukraine, if you think about it economically, there are a couple things it just kind of has in its reserve. It has massive massive reservoir of agricultural wealth in the form of grain and sunflower seeds. That's great. It has oil, it has natural gas, it has the Soviet legacy of heavy industry. But most Soviet legacy of heavy industry has been slowly destroyed by the theft that's occurred over the past 25 years. Agriculture has been kept alive, partly because it's hard to kill, but also because it has been recognized and taken over by competent Ukrainian businessmen and foreigners who have turned it into something that is profitable and helpful for the country. So when you think about small businesses in Ukraine, it's a shame because it's basically the same story across the board. Ukrainian production struggles with small production, I would say, struggles with a corrupt state, with bribe solicitations fairly constantly. You hear that a lot from small business people here. That being said, there are brave Ukrainian entrepreneurs that have made it through. We're going to profile some of them.
Well, plenty for us to be getting our teeth into there, and please do pick up the paper next week and to have a look at our business focus, where we'll be delving into all of those issues. And finally, then the last issue which remains to be said is that Ukraine is still trying to find its feet in the new world, which is now with Trump in the White House. Josh, I know you've been looking into this.
It's Trump's world right now, whether we like it or not. And one interesting tidbit that we've seen is now Yulia Tymoshenko this past week had her second meeting with Donald Trump.
The former prime minister of Ukraine.
And potentially future prime minister if she has her way, according to some analysts. She's in an interesting political position right now in Ukraine where she doesn't have any official power other than the head of her party, Batyshina, but at the same time, she's not doing poorly in the polls. So the gamble would be that she calls early elections. She gets the U.S. to pressure the Ukrainian government into calling early elections, which gives her a shot at power. And in order to do that, or at least give the U.S. a reason for doing that, she portrays herself as a reasonable conduit for Trump. Although it's basically politically impossible for Trump at the moment in the States to make any conciliatory moves towards Russia, there's an interesting opportunity here for Tymoshenko as an intermediary, given that she could offer, if the proposal is seen to be coming out of Ukraine, you could also think of the Artemivka thing as a sort of a test balloon for this. If a peace proposal with Russia is seen to be coming out of Ukraine, it defrays the political costs for Trump in the United States. We also know that Tymoshenko has her criminal connections from her time as prime minister, and she was involved in the corrupt Uyghur Transgaz deal, as well. So we know that, basically all the pieces are there. The question is just how they fall into place.
Well, it's a very interesting picture that you do draw. So, of course, one will be looking out for very closely to see how Tymoshenko will play her hand. That's all we have time for this week, I'm afraid. That's where we'll have to leave it. But thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Rahim Rahemtulla, staff journalist at the Kyiv Post. I've been joined by Josh Kavinsky, also a staff journalist. Tune in again next week.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. The show where we discuss